welcome to Q&A 2017. I did one last year, but I thought I'd do one again this year, and this is it. I thought I'd do it in the comforts of my own home for a change. Yeah, I have the questions here, so let's get started. Mark asks, what is your songwriting process, jamming, playing to a beat? Well, I don't really have a songwriting process because it can be basically anything. I can write even drums first, chords, a guitar riff, a melody. So there isn't really one. I used to jam a lot back when I had time, but nowadays the bands I play in, we're all on relatively tight schedules, so we don't really have the time to jam, which is a shame because jamming is great. Um, but yeah, it can basically be anything. I have a video on my lesson site. The site's called ejkguitaracademy.com. Easiest name in the world. I'll put a link below. It's in the free section. The video is called Songwriting 1, where I write a song from start to finish. You might have to scroll down a bit to find it, but it's there if you want to look it up. So that's one way I write songs. Okay. Alexander asks or writes, Fender always used tiny frets on its guitars. I wonder if everybody refretting it with bigger frets or someone famous uses the ability to touch fingerboard as parts of getting their sound. Can't even read anymore. Since you're influenced by Yngwie, I believe that you use big frets and even scalloping your fingerboard. What do you think about this issue? Well, first off, the Fenders I have, they're Yngwie Strats, so they're scalloped and the frets are big. I'm not sure about fret sizes on Fenders, but I like big frets, and basically all my guitars are scalloped, apart from the 7 strings. Everything else I think is, as far as I can remember. As far as touching the fingerboard to create a sound, unless you mean a style, I mean, of course it can be a part of your style, I guess, but sound-wise it shouldn't make a difference. For me, I don't know. For me, touching the fingerboard with the string is annoying because it creates added resistance and it gives me less control over bends and vibrato, and basically that's what I find is the most important part of lead guitar playing. So yeah, I don't like feeling the wood under my fingers or touching the strings. Craig asks, have you ever considered creating a lessons section to specifically cover classic intro riffs and maybe even those within songs? Nothing too complicated, just for instance, Johnny B. Good, Purple Haze, Sunshine of Your Love, Sweet Child of Mine. What Craig is referring to here is the Guitar Academy, which I referred to earlier, and you can find the link below. So I have different sections on the site. Basically, I have thought about this, but it's way too distant in the future for me to think about it anymore. The thought has popped into my head, but the idea basically with the site is to give you guys the tools to figure this stuff out by yourself, because there are certain things, certain tools that can help you, and I think you should transcribe stuff yourselves because it improves your ears. That being said, might be at some point in the future, but at the moment there's too much stuff to be added to the site in all the different categories, especially my own songs, so not at the moment, no. Steve asks, alright, as a keyboard player, I'm always interested in what, if any, keyboard players might have had some influence on you as you were maturing. I was really interested when Yngwie went out of his way to identify Tony Banks of Genesis as a big influence, and I wondered if there were any boardists in your past loves, so to speak. Well, I've always thought it's interesting that Yngwie brings up Tony Banks, although he does it in passing, um, because he's much more influenced by the classical guys. But for him, as far as I understood, Genesis and Tony Banks were a way into classical music for him. For me, Genesis was and is one of my favorite bands of all time. And Tony Banks is a great keyboard player. And if there is one keyboard player who has influenced me a lot, then that would be Tony Banks. Other keyboard players, well, John Lord maybe to a certain extent, but that's maybe just regarding Hammond. Maybe a bit of Jens Johansson and Derek Sherinian, but don't know how much. More so, I would say, people like George Shearing or forgot the name, Brad Meldau, piano players, because they've influenced me with regard to dynamics when you're playing clean sounds, or especially when you're playing acoustic guitar. Now that's due to the fact that you can't bend notes on the piano, so you have to learn to do different things to create interest. And one of the things you can do is use dynamics, and these guys are great with dynamics. I find that the same stuff applies to the acoustic guitar quite a lot. So Meldau and Shearing would be two. Lyle Mays, who's played with Pat Metheny, might be one. But the main one would be Tony Banks, because Genesis have influenced me a lot. Dan asks, how do you like the fractal axe effects? Do you have any thoughts about digital versus analog? And he continues, I'm still kind of a dinosaur using Boss stomp boxes. Well, I prefer the old Marshalls. I prefer tube amps. And I do use stomp boxes in front of the Marshall. But when gigging, it's often more, what's the word? It's easier to bring along the fractal audio, the Axe effects, because it has every sound almost in the world, and they're really good. So much so that it's almost like playing a Marshall. Not quite, but almost. And when you have all the sounds available during certain gigs, that's a big bonus. Because the Marshalls I use, they're basically just one sound. That sound is better than any sound for me, but it's still just one sound, so if you need many sounds, that might be a problem. But on a general level, analog still beats digital as far as guitar amps go. That's my personal opinion anyway. Miles asks, what inspires you as a musician? What is your ultimate goal? And do you have a touring band? Well, I don't have a touring band for my solo stuff. I do play in a couple of bands that do gigs. Kilpi does gigs, and Helena and Kalevi, or at least a certain version of it, does gigs. We do acoustic trio and duo gigs. I also play troubadour stuff on my own, and but not a touring band for my own stuff. What my ultimate goal is basically to be able to make money doing this, not this Q&A video stuff, but making music, even though I do enjoy doing the occasional video. But that's my goal. I used to want to be a rock star, and I still do. But my kind of realistic goal is to make a living doing this. Um, what inspires me as a musician? Well, it can be the sunshine, it can be a sound, it can be anything. Basically, I don't know what it is. It's so difficult to pinpoint because there are so many things that kind of do it for me. So, might be a disappointing answer, but there it is. Lee asks, at what age did you first pick up the guitar? How many hours a day did you practice? And how many hours now do you practice? And did you ever practice with a metronome? Well, I was 11 when I started, but I only properly started when I was 13. That's when I started really practicing, and I practiced 3 to 6 hours every day. I did once try a 10-hour session, but that kind of when I stopped that, I felt so strange in the head that that wasn't for me. At some point, it became a bit less, and I took breaks, and I think those breaks were really good because weren't long breaks, like 2 days. I didn't play, then I played for 4 days, and I took a 2 day break or something. It wasn't planned, but it just kind of happened. And in hindsight, I think those breaks were really good because I listened to a lot of music during those breaks, um, and that kind of broadened my musical horizons. And musically, I think it was really good for me. From a technical standpoint, it wasn't too good taking breaks because my technique didn't improve during those days. Um, but from a musical standpoint, and that's why we're doing this. It's not because of it's because of music. From a musical standpoint, I think it was really good. Nowadays, I don't really practice. I don't have time. It's really basically only when I have to practice for something. So if I have a show coming up where I need to do something I've forgotten or a new song or I need to brush up on stuff, then I practice a bit. I keep it to a minimum. When I do practice, I mostly just play. Uh, at some point during my youthful years, I kind of stopped practicing almost altogether and just started playing over backing tracks and CDs and cassettes way back then. You remember those? Um, because I thought that was more fun. And also, I think that was good for my improvising because I basically improvised everything. So that probably helped. Um, did I ever practice with a metronome? I tried it, didn't like it too much, but practicing with the CDs and cassettes gave me a fairly steady beat, so I didn't become totally uh, kind of blind to rhythm. And Paul Gilbert once said that it's good to practice with a metronome occasionally, but that you should also practice without one, because if you only practice with a metronome, you're gonna end up not developing your own sense of rhythm. And I think there's something to this. Practicing with a metronome all the time, I kind of get the feeling that you might end up kind of sterile, and that's something a lot of modern guitar players suffer from. The same thing with drummers. They sound like machines, they sound perfect. And it sounds great for about 10 seconds, might even be 5 minutes. You might get through one song and then you listen to the song again and you kind of start realizing, well, there's nothing here except surface. And the surface is perfect. And I think what makes music interesting is the human element in it, so that it's not perfect. And metronomes kind of force you towards perfection. They're really good in moderate amounts because you need kind of to know uh, the absolute rhythm, or what you want to call it, and then you need your own kind of sense of rhythm because you want to be able to go either side of the beat, or at least try to be aware of the beat and go both sides of it. Well, anyway, I'm rambling on now, but I hope that makes sense. Yeah. Next one. Geraldine asks, what's the difference between an acoustic and an electric guitar? Well, they're two different instruments. Same concepts apply. Uh, Both have 6 strings, unless it's a 7-string electric guitar or an 89-string acoustic guitar. But basically, they're two different instruments. You need to approach them differently, and that's basically what I think in a nutshell. Don't want to give you a longer answer because I want to keep this video slightly shorter, but they're different instruments. One guitar player who kind of, for me, embodies this is Yngwie Malmsteen, because he plays the electric guitar so well. He's probably my favorite guitar player. But when he plays the acoustic, I don't really like it. I like some of the compositions he has, be it his own compositions or that he's playing Bach or something. But the guitar sound is so it's so compressed, and don't like it. And he kind of embodies that, almost like he hasn't understood that it's a different instrument. Well, that's, for me at least, what it's about. Geraldine continues, also, would you be able to give a brief history or a timeline simplification of rock music and where it is today?
Well, when rock music started, it was all really fresh and quite simple to begin with. Then it got much harder to play, and it got louder as well. And nowadays, it's not doing too well, is it?
Dunno. Brief timeline of rock history, that's basically it. It started out, it did well, and now it's not doing too well. Because this is a topic I could do a 10-hour video on. And in relation to that, which segments do you relate to most for inspiration or style? Well, basically all kinds of different segments. Yngwie is my favorite. I like the shred era, Vi Satriani type guys. I like Jeff Beck's son, Gary Moore, both his blues stuff and his hard rock stuff. Like Cream, so really early stuff. It goes way back to Hendrix. I like some of the modern guys like Matthias Eklund, Devin Townsend, Meshuggah. So I like all kinds of stuff. For me, rock is basically like any other genre. There are probably the same amounts of, percentage-wise, the same amounts of good musicians in rock as in any other genre. Notable exceptions might be what these DJs are doing, like David Guetta or someone who, I'm not sure if he's a good musician, although he can write a few decent songs. Rap might be another one. There are really good rappers, but I'm not sure if they're great musicians, because it's a slightly different thing, because they do lyrics. And, well, maybe I'm wrong. As a general rule, I don't think any genre is good or bad, although I do enjoy certain genres more than other ones. Stanny asks, what's... Oh, sorry, I skipped one question. No, I didn't. Maybe I should take a break, but I won't. I'll keep on till the bitter end. Stanley asks, what's the meaning of life?
Party hard all the time.
I don't know. The meaning of life, I suspect it's different for each and every one of us. And the answer might be so profoundly simple that we will cry at its beauty, and yet so unimaginably complex at the same time that we will cry with despair. or some such bollocks. Anyway, on to the next question. Lou asks, what you do when you feel you're in a creative or technical rut? Um, I think for me, the issue has always been to not try and force any issue. Unless I get angry, then I usually kind of bang my head against the wall even harder until either I or the wall breaks. Um, might explain why I'm so weird. But on a more general level, I kind of play something different, or I go and listen to something totally different. If I've been doing a bunch of Yngwie Malmsteen stuff for a while, let's say, and all I can think of is kind of it starts repeating itself, then I go and listen to something completely different, like Pat Metheny, and that kind of rubs off, and then I get out of the vicious cycle of just doing that one kind of same thing rehashed. Um, Same goes for technique. I try to learn a new technique to keep things interesting. Although that's the last time I did that, that's been a while ago because I don't have time to learn new techniques. I've kind of gotten a bit disinterested with technique recently. I don't know if it's age or if it's because I don't have time and I'm kind of covering up for that. I'm just saying I don't have time. Um, yeah, play something different. Or don't play anything at all. That's another thing you can do. Take a few days off. Number two by Lou. I've read lots of dissenting opinions about pick attack, guitar position, etc. that claim to be the key to achieving speed. In my own playing, I've tried adjusting hand position and working on speed with a metronome, etc., and I seem to be unable to get to the next level. Do you have any advice on developing better picking synchronization, speed, and articulation? Well, Lou is a member of my guitar academy, and I have a few videos on picking synchronization or alternate picking and economy picking. I don't really go into speed, how you get into speed in those videos, and that's something I have been thinking of doing because um, it's a difficult question. This genetically, we're kind of predisposed to we're programmed in different ways. So some of us are naturally quicker than others. It's the same as with athletics. Some people are um, more built for long distance running, where it's not so fast, and some people are built to run fast, shorter distances. This kind of thing, mm, well, some people are naturally better at it, but there are ways to get better. Now, Lou has been doing these things by doing different exercises and playing with a metronome. Well, the two pieces of advice I can offer off the top of my head, um, without doing a special video on the topic, one is, let's say you've gotten to the 100, you've gotten to 120 BPM on the metronome, and you go to 122, and you find that 122 is too much for whatever lick you're doing, or that you're having trouble with that. Um, just ignore 122 and go to 124 or 126 or even 130, and you'll mess it up royally. But then go back to 122, and you might find that you can actually play it in that tempo then. So you kind of jump ahead a bit to come back, but not as far as where you started from, uh, and gradually you might be able to build speed that way. Now that's kind of second-hand advice because I've heard that from someone else. Might have been John Petrucci. I never really did that because I didn't practice too much with the metronome. Another way to do it is to you practice slowly first, of course, to get accuracy, and then, but I think that's one thing, is accuracy is here, and you're slow, but then at some point you kind of just have to let go and play it as fast as you can. Don't care about being accurate. Just play it as fast as you can. Um, who cares if it goes wrong? And then you kind of keep doing the accurate bit slowly, try to build that a bit, and these two will meet at some point. So, or at least the accurate bit will kind of catch up with the fast bit. The fast bit will become more and more accurate. So just go for it. The worst thing that can happen is that you'll play so fast that you'll go back in time or something. Um, anyway, maybe I'll do a video on that at some point as well. But I hope that kind of helps you get started. And number 3, when you're writing instrumental music, do you compose every note of your solo sections or do you let them develop through improvisation? If you improvise, how do you work on memorizing your compositions later for live performance? I don't compose solos. Not, almost not at all. I kind of accidentally compose parts of them that I notice I play the same way, or at least roughly the same way live. Um, some occasional bit I might actually compose, but mostly it's just improvisation. Um, and that kind of leads to I don't memorize the solos. I mean, I memorize the melodies, of course, and stuff like that. Um, I memorize if it has arpeggios, I memorize those. But the solos, they're basically off the top of my head. That comes with a risk because you can mess them up royally. Um, but it's more fun for me that way. And the reward that comes is that when it goes really well, it's so much better than a planned solo. I think improvisation is something that's not enough shred guitar players do. I think more people should improvise because it's great fun and it's great fun listening to it. Majid asks, when did you start playing guitar? 11. Who inspires you the most in guitar playing? If one name, that would be Yngwie Malmsteen, but other than that, Steve Vai, Satriani, I mentioned those. Jeff Beck, I mentioned. Steve Lukather is one. Pat Metheny is one. Danny Gatton is one. Go back to Hendrix and all that stuff. Fredrik Dordendahl of Meshuggah, Matthias J. Eklund, so on. And Majid has a third question. Do you feel that distortion pedals are always necessary, as Eddie Van Halen doesn't agree at all? Always? No, they're not always necessary. They're necessary depending on the sound you're after and the amp you're using. For me, with the Plexi 50-watt Plexi Marshalls, I need an overdrive pedal in front because otherwise I won't get enough overdrive. I like overdrive from the pedal. I like overdrive in the power amp section. I don't like the kind of modern overdrive or high gain amps where you have all the gain coming in the preamp section. But if you have one of those, and there are some really good ones out there, if you have one of those, then you don't need an overdrive or a distortion pedal in front because you already have all the high gain stuff going on in the amp. You might find a pedal that you like. Now that's a different thing. But Eddie Van Halen has it spot on. You don't always need a distortion pedal. But then again, Yngwie Malmsteen always needs a distortion pedal with his old Plexi amps. So it's a matter of what kind of sound you're after. Chris asks, how often do you practice? Not much anymore. How many children do you have? I have two, and they're one of the reasons I don't practice too much anymore. Um, and then, when you're not playing at gigs, what do you do like for a living, your downtime, etc.? Well, for a living, I work as a music teacher in elementary school. That's great fun. Um, in my downtime, I spend time with my kids, pretty much. I play football, the thing that's oddly known as soccer in the US. Um, I try to read, but I don't have much time to read, so, well, that's kind of something that I would like to do more of. Mm, what else? The occasional pint with a good friend, something like that. Okay, John asks, how do you build pinky strength and speed? Is there a fun lesson exercise? There is a whole video on the topic on my guitar lesson site, but it's in a section that costs. You can find the link to the site below and you can check out if you actually wait a second, it might be a free one. Well, anyway, um, you can go and check it out, the site that is, and see if you want to pay. There's a whole video on the topic because there are a few exercises that can help. Basically, any of the basic picking exercises where you use all four fingers and you do, let's say you do index finger, middle finger, ring finger, pinky, and then move on to the next string and go across all six strings, move up one fret and go across all six strings again, always using every finger. That's one exercise that you can use. It doesn't target the pinky as such, it targets the whole hand, but it helps the pinky as well. But yeah, there are other exercises as well. I might put the pinky video on the free in the free section for a while. Don't know. Anyway, Woody asks, well, first question in two parts. How old were you when you started playing? Yes, I was 11. And what does playing guitar mean to you? Well, back when I started playing, when I was 11, nothing. When I was 13 and actually started playing, it started meaning more and more and more. I did it so much, it became kind of who I was. Um, it got to the point where I'd pick the guitar, stick with the guitar rather than with a girlfriend. And when I was 17, 18, I didn't go to school, I just stayed home and practiced. Um, and but kind of as I've gotten older, it started to mean less and less because I spend less time doing it. I have kids now, uh, and they kind of, by definition or by default, have to mean more. They do. I have a wife who I've been with for 13 years now. Um, but on the other hand, it's kind of a two-way thing, this. On the other hand, it means more and more to me now because I've been doing it so long, and because I have so little time to do it, I kind of value the moments when I do get to do it. I value them more. So I could say everything and nothing. Maybe that's the meaning of life for me, playing guitar. Second question. If you could walk into any gig with any band to be their lead guitar player, who would the band be? Well, I can't really walk into Yngwie Malmsteen's band because it's Yngwie Malmsteen. I'd say Devin Townsend. The only problem is he doesn't have enough guitar solos for me, but we can soon remedy that, can't we? Actually, I'd just be happy playing rhythm guitar for Devin Townsend and listening to him sing every night. He's great. Susie asks, I've always wondered how guitars, their sounds they can produce, make guitar players feel. For me, it gives me power and a smile comes over my face. I feel inspired. How about you? Well, pretty much the same. Um, just plug a Fender Strat into a Marshall put everything on loud and play an E chord, and that's basically it. That's the open E or an open A. Don't need all that fast shred stuff, just need the open E, and it blasts through that Marshall, and that puts a smile on my face, gives me power, and inspires me. The same goes with a good acoustic guitar, but you could play it loud or soft, and the same thing happens. Then again, the same thing can happen with any number of instruments, but for me, the guitar that's the main one for me. Okay, one last question. Karen asks, or says, my questions are probably the same as everyone else's, so I won't bother, unless you can show a way for anyone to play the G. Now, I'll be right back. Do a small edit here. Okay, so back again. Someone picked up a guitar, just to show you. Now, I assume Karen doesn't just mean G as in the G string. I assume Karen means the actual chord G. That one. Now, it's a bit of a tricky one, I know, because if you have small hands, it might be difficult to reach. Lots of my students in elementary school have trouble with this one. So I usually teach them a variation of this, or a cheat version, because you normally have this fingering. You have pinky on 3rd frets of the high E string, middle finger on the 3rd frets of the low E string, and index finger on the 2nd frets of the A string. Now, and then you do this. Some people play the chord with that finger there, ring finger instead of pinky. Some people play it like this, where they have the pinky and the ring finger. Any which way is fine. First things first, I like to use the pinky because it gives me better reach. Second, you can ignore the index finger on the 2nd fret of the A string. That gives you a bit more, well, a bit more reach maybe, or at least a bit more comfort. And you just play so that you dampen the string with your middle finger, the A string that is, and then you just strum all the difference between the regular one, this, and the one I showed you is if you still can't reach it. Actually, some of my students play with the index finger on the 3rd frets. You can try if that's better. If you still can't reach, you can do so that you play the D string, the G string, the B string, and the E string. Only those. That way you don't have a bass note, but for some occasions that's good. So you can play. A different way would be to ignore the high E string and just play kind of. So you play every other string except that one. You dampen the A string, unless you want to fret it. That's a bit difficult. You can also, but it might be doable if you're using your fingers, like thumb for the low E string, index finger for D, middle finger for G, and one finger, the ring finger in this case, for B. So you do like something like this. So that's a couple of ways you can try. Um, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Damn, it's gone on for 40 minutes now. Huh. Well, if you have any further questions regarding any of the answers I gave, you can email me. I do sincerely hope that you connect with me on Facebook and or Twitter if you haven't already. Put links below. I think I have an Instagram. Yes, I do. Don't use that too much, but I occasionally post videos on Facebook, especially, and stuff that I don't post anywhere else. Short, kind of having fun videos. You can find my website below and go and have a look around if you haven't already. If you have done all of those things, don't know. Take care. See you later. Bye.